So we'll call the meeting to order at 7:01. Are there any changes to the agenda? Do we need any additions or changes? Hearing none. We'll move on to approval of minutes from July 22nd. Will someone make a motion? Len, thank you. Is there a second? Anybody? Adrian. Adrian will second. Thank you. Okay. Is there any discussion with regard to the minutes of the meeting from July 22nd? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of July 22nd, please give me a thumbs up. I can see everybody. Good. Excellent. Okay. Anyone opposed? Speak up. Hearing none. The minutes are approved. We have public input and announcements. And Brian, you're on, right? Yes? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, Tammy, we do have Brian here. So if you like you said, we could go ahead and have Brian do public comment, and then we can give it a little bit more time and come back if anybody else ends up hopping in that got signed up with Ann later.
Sure, I think we'll do that. So Brian, if you're ready, do you want to speak? And you're good? You have,
I'm good.
Okay. You'll have 3 minutes, and I'll time you. If you need that, I'll let you know when you have like 30 seconds left. Okay?
Okay, I appreciate that.
No problem.
I want to thank the board for having me be able to make some public comment. I'd like to say first that my comments are only regarding school-age children, as I have 2 children in the Wallingford Elementary School. My understanding is that students will be doing some form of synchronous and asynchronous learning, and this will involve a lot of time in front of the computer. I would like to hear the board's input and wonder if this is pedagogically correct in terms of students with the same age academics and what that would mean for them. So I'd like to hear if that's a correct model for those age students. Again, this is the elementary school. I'm also interested in why our school district is not offering any childcare support for younger students that is being offered in other districts as well. If we look at the RNESU in Brandon, they are offering some childcare support to working families and to essential workers. How will young children with working parents be able to learn from home when they're struggling with childcare issues and essentially proctoring issues with the care over remote learning? Fourth, I'm not aware of any other school district that is not offering some in-person teaching and childcare support for younger students. All the following school districts are offering at least some sort of in-person learning to any child in the elementary ages for younger kids. That includes the ACSD in Middlebury, RNESU for Brandon, Rutland City, Bennington / Rutland Supervisor Union, the Slate Valley, including Fairhaven, and the 2 rivers, including Ludlow. The fifth comment that I have is that I've spoken with attorney Aaron Gallivan of Larson and Gallivan in Rutland, who raises the legal issue of the Vermont Constitution in Brigham versus Vermont, where she questioned whether Mill River's reopening to deny elementary age children an education equal to or comparable to other children in districts that are nearby would violate the education and common benefits clauses of the Vermont Constitution in Brigham versus Vermont. My last comment for the board, respectfully, is that school is opening only 5 weeks away, and would like to know if this is a final decision or if we are having continued input and engagement with the parents to help solve some of the child care and planning issues that I've raised previously. That is all that I have to offer today. Okay,
thank you, Brian. And if you would like to put that in an email to me, we can get you a response in writing. Okay?
I'm absolutely happy to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Ann, any other public comment right now?
I do not have any others.
Okay. All right. So then what we will do is we had left the window on the agenda open until 7:15. So we will move on to the equity work update. And if Ann let us know, maybe let Dave know if there's anybody else prior to 7:15, and then we'll just come back to that. All right. And Brian, if you would nicely, when we start the board meeting, we're asking when people are done with public comment that they leave, just because for purposes, yeah. You can listen on the YouTube stream. Thank you. Okay, so equity work update. Dave, Jody.
Yeah, so I'll turn that to Jody, and then I'll probably jump in after that. Go ahead, Jody.
So the flag raising committee met the night after the last board meeting, took into account the public comment from the board meeting before, just, you know, thinking carefully about making sure that we're considering all voices. We are moving forward in the creation of some educational materials to put in front of Andrew Jones, our curriculum director, around the 2 flag raisings that will be developmentally appropriate. They'll be created by a curricular committee within that flag raising committee, but then vetted through Mill River District curricular specialists to make sure that they are developmentally appropriate at each level. We are working on identifying a speaker and a student to raise the flag at each school. On the days that we do raise the flags, these flag raisings will be considered an educational opportunity, and so they will not be open to visitors because it's a part of our school's educational opportunities. We now know, because we will be starting in remote learning, that students will not be present for those flag raisings, but we will record the raisings themselves and the speeches that go along with it. As far as district-based equity work, we continue to plan for next year. Andrew and I are working together to get things set up for our August and early September days with teachers, following our district equity plan, and I'm working on getting professional development set up for the school year. And I believe, talk about that now or later?
That's a coming up agenda item a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Tammy,
Dave?
if I could just jump in and share. So again, kudos to Jody and the folks she's working with. There's good work going on. As a board, we do have an agenda item coming up that is related to the board professional development. And I know that we've already got an August session ready that Amy Martone is helping to get arranged and set up for us. But Jody and I do have some proposals for the board, and we'll explain those proposals in terms of the equity-based PD that we would recommend the board consider and engage in. Also, just in the matter of, fully disclosing the nature of how things go when it comes to the topic of the flags being raised. If I were to generalize, I would say that our local feedback on the topic has slowed down significantly, but we are hearing from a reasonable number of folks more nationally oriented. There are a few selected blogs and websites that have picked up the Mill River story and have kind of spread that story out. So we're getting our fair share of emails and voicemails and in-person calls with folks expressing their opinions about the decision of the board and the support of the administrators for that decision. Nothing that is, board meeting relevant in terms of content, but it's just worth the board being aware that, we're still receiving and processing that type of feedback so that you're tuned into it.
Thank you. Any questions for Jody or Dave? Comments? Okay.
And I guess I want to say, Tammy, that's not to suggest that there's not still local input to be had, that people locally don't have opinions. That has settled down compared to the last board meeting that we had.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I guess that we could move on. Oh, Doug. Go ahead, Doug.
I sort of caught you after you went out. Would it be a better way to do the starting the flag after the kids start coming back in November?
Candidly, Doug, that would be something that the board would need to direct us on if the board felt differently than its initial directive. The initial directive was to have it raised, targeting the first week of school. So we'd be at the pleasure of the board overall in terms of how you wanted to see that happen.
Okay, John, you had something to add?
Well, the flag committee has a meeting, I believe, tomorrow evening, and I think that would be something that we would want to discuss and maybe come back with a recommendation. Would you agree, Jody?
So, yes, I would agree. We did briefly discuss that at the last flag committee meeting. It was the feeling of those on the committee that it was better to raise the flags now in the first few weeks of school rather than to wait because in the days of COVID-19, we just don't know what the next steps are.
And Len,
but again,
go ahead.
you know, the committee defers to the board.
Thank you, Jody. Len.
Yeah, at the last meeting, I suggested that we raise them separately because we're trying to use them as lessons, and I think we can't depend on anything in terms of COVID-19. So I really think just raising them, even together or separately or whatever, isn't doing what we hope to accomplish. We wanted kids who came into school to feel that they were welcomed and respected and honored. Well, they're not coming back to school. So my opinion is that we wait until school's open, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think we wait till that happens, because we raise those flags, there's no kids coming to school. They don't see them. They don't know. I just, again, my opinion, I think you wait until you have the prime opportunity to make a point, to teach a lesson to all the students and the community. And you need to do that with a public thing. Sorry.
Thank you, Len. Anybody else?
This is Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I was wearing my mask because I'm in a select board meeting. I wonder whether delaying at least the Black Lives Matter flag, which we said we were going to put at the opening of school, is not a good way to start this whole process. We're doing school virtually. And if we expect kids to be able to do that successfully, why can we not have them take part in a flag raising virtually? I mean, I just don't understand if we're content with virtual school and think that it can be done properly, which I do think it can. I don't see why we couldn't do the same flag raising virtually and still have a decent lesson. I do still want to have the conversation as to whether or not we separate the flag raisings to show value to both, but that's another discussion. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think just as a matter of protocol, I think the board discussion on this is valuable and important. My recommendation for process would be, you know, we've got this administrative designated committee that's doing this work, and I'd recommend let's let that group bring back their recommendations, and then the board actually has something tangible to respond to, you know, one direction or another. That seems to be a good way to approach it.
Okay, great. I'm just going to pop in. Does that sound good with everybody? Pop back in with Anne. Do we have any public comments since it's 7:15 and that's the cutoff?
No more comments, Tammy.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anybody out that might want to speak. Okay, all right. Any other discussion on this topic? Jody, go ahead.
Sorry, just two clarifiers. I do just want to point out that the committee has been moving forward with the expectation of raising the flags in 2 different times. And so that is what we have been working on. You know, again, deferring to the board's decision, but that's where we are going with it right now. And also to say the next full committee meeting is 8/13. And so I will come back to the 8/18 meeting with recommendations from that. The board wants the recommendation, just to clarify, on whether to wait until students are in person or to continue remotely. Is there any other thing the board would like recommendations from the committee on? Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Then we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the reopening update. So Dave.
BJ has something to ask.
Yeah,
Oh,
Tammy,
I'm
it's up to you,
sorry.
Jason.
I'm sorry. It's hard. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Jody, I liked what you're saying about the curriculum that was supposed to go along with them. I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about that at the next meeting, what you come up with that. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else? And I will look more carefully at my screen.
Sorry.
Len, yes, go ahead.
And maybe we need to provide information to the public about what we're doing. I think a lot of folks don't understand what this all entails, and they have certain perspectives. And I think, Jody, if we can do something on a grander scale, and I don't want to dump it on you, but to let the community members know what it is exactly that the route that we're going down. I think the education piece, I think, is important.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to share out whatever is relevant. I would ask for a little bit more guidance. So it would be, usually we wouldn't share out, curricular based teacher tools with the board on other things. And so I would just need a little more clarification on what level of detail the board would be looking for there.
Well, I'll get back to you. I need to chew on it a little bit because it popped in my head, and we need to do a better job of keeping our community informed of where we're going, and I think that would alleviate a lot of the issues that we run into. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. You have everything you need, Jody? Any clarification? Okay. So we'll go on to reopening then. So Dave.
You bet. Thank you, Tammy. And I guess to start out, what I want to share with you tonight, obviously the board is well aware of where we are with reopening. You've seen the communication that's gone out to families as of last Friday, identifying our start day of September 8th, which is a statewide start day, and then our plan to go remote for our open, and then shared a frequently asked questions document with families on Monday of this week, just kind of following up on some of the feedback there. I must admit to the board, I've been flashing back on elementary school myself and sitting in classrooms, and I'm sure some of you can picture this. I had a lot of teachers that were very fond of those like motivational posters that you could buy from Scholastic, the one where there'd be like a cat hanging off a bookcase or looking into a fishbowl or that type of thing, and it would say hang in there, or you're almost there, what have you. And I remember one of them which stated something along the lines of doing what is right is not always popular, and doing what is popular is not always right. And that concept has resonated with me a little bit in the last not just several days, but several weeks and months, at the very least, going back to March. So you entrusted me by delegating the responsibility to make a decision about what our instructional disposition would be for the start of the school year. That's the language used by the state, is instructional disposition, meaning that schools have the authority under statute to make the determinations about how we're going to deliver instruction. Our public input a little bit earlier kind of asked about the legal basis of all of that, and the Secretary of Education, through the guidance coming from the AOE, has made it very clear that the district has the ability to decide what instructional delivery will look like in this COVID environment. But that doesn't suggest that it's not been very difficult to make the decision that we made to go remote. I cannot understate enough the significance of the quandary that our families are in, that have one or two parents working, that have children that have childcare needs. And I can't understate the burden that not just me, but all of our administrators have been feeling really since mid-March, when we first went to schools being closed. There's a daily struggle in terms of how do you make sense of this? What do we do for kids? How do you help families the best you can? And in the COVID world that we're all navigating, none of us are on our own in this. We all know what this feels like. We know that all the rules and all the dynamics and all the norms have changed for us. It's fair to let you know that I just did a quick email count. I've gotten feedback from 21 parents since last Friday, which is a sizable number, but it's not an overwhelming number. Out of those 21 parents, 6 of those folks have communicated messages along the lines of, thanks for making this decision. We know this is pretty tough, but we're grateful that you're looking out for families and kids in this way. And then 15 of those families have been very upset, and that's generally linked to how the remote learning decision impacts, at-home dynamics, work dynamics, childcare dynamics, or concerns about remote learning in general. I spoke to one parent middle of last week, and this is before I had gone public with the decision about things being remote, although I was pretty firmly in that place by that point in time. And we were talking about what the in-person design that we were thinking about would look like. And I suggested to this parent, listen, I need you to know that remote learning is still on the table and may very well be what happens, because I didn't want to leave a conversation misleading someone and having them think, hey, I just talked to that guy on Wednesday, and on Friday now, I'm hearing something different. And, from that parent, I heard, hey, we've got childcare issues, but we've kind of seen this coming and we're going to figure this out. So there's a whole variety of how people are navigating things, how people are approaching things, et cetera. I think it's worth you knowing how I thought and how our administrative team thought about kind of criteria and how are we making this decision? What do we base that on? And really, there were 3 areas that I shared with parents early on that first priority is and has to be safety and health of the kids and the adults who work with them, and making sure that we're taking that on as our first priority. Second priority was thinking about what the best instructional delivery for our kids is, not just in the moment, not just September 8th, but on a long-term basis. And then third, what are the social emotional dynamics of whatever decision we make and whatever decision I make, just to talk through some of those concepts with you. On the safety and health piece, this continues to be a moving target, but if I were to generalize about what I'm seeing our country on the whole continue to struggle with rising numbers or plateaued very high numbers. I'm seeing clear examples in the public when I go into the public of people who are not taking the mask mandate in Vermont seriously. I can't even begin to number for you the reports that we get about youth athletic teams and leagues engaging in different parts across the state with the appearance that there are no rules or expectations whatsoever about how we're managing, the health dynamics around COVID. I hear the governor talk about his perspective and concern that the virus will be returning to the Northeast. I've seen the governor issue a mask mandate for the state effective August 1st, which, let's be frank, in March, April, May, June, and July, we did not have a mask mandate. Same virus, different dynamics. And so kind of watching those trends and watching how things are playing out had an impact with us. We have staff members and their families who are incredibly concerned about what this looks like from a school standpoint. And the reality that I see in terms of operations is when we look at the health guidance that the state has issued, one case in one classroom essentially paralyzes a school and almost forces us into a shutdown of at least a school and possibly even the entire district when you think about possible bus interaction, extra groups of kids being exposed, et cetera. So from the standpoint of looking at safety for students and health, in the near term, it made the most sense for us to say, let's start remote in an environment that we can control, and that will allow us to watch what happens. That'll allow us to respond. Now, we also are looking to provide services for special needs students with IEPs to families that are interested in coming in person for that. And one of the nice things about that is that will allow us to become more and more effective at our procedures that we need to follow. When you think about students getting on board a bus and the screenings, how do we navigate nurses' offices? How do we navigate students that are sick and need to be picked up? It'll be much better for all of us to navigate that with maybe 50 or 60 students as opposed to 900 students. So there's some benefit to that. In terms of the instructional options and what do we look at for best instructional delivery, this is my perspective, and I must be candid with you. I've been a school administrator for 18 years. I've been running schools for a while. Most of the insides and outs of what happened in a school, I've seen them, done them, and been around the block 10 times with all of them. So I know how things work in schools, and our other administrators know the same thing. And one of the things we're identifying is the high likelihood if we opened in person, the natural struggles that would exist in the hybrid mode that we were looking at for 7 through 12 with students in person, not in person, et cetera. There are so many baked in challenges to making that be successful that in and of itself would be an extreme challenge that we are very skeptical about our ability to be successful with it. Add to that the very strong likelihood that a case will close down a school or the district, and we would be looking at an immediate switch into remote learning. That would be a very difficult position to put families and teachers and students in. When we are thinking about when to make a decision like this, and I released the information on July 31st, part of that reason was July 31st is about 5 weeks in advance of that September 8th start date. I would much rather give families 5 weeks to start to think through plans than give them 5 hours to start to think through plans, which is maybe a little bit dramatic, but at least we could have an evening before type of decision that could thrust us into remote learning. And finally, the concept of social emotional dynamics. I'll tell you what, I've been working in the office a little bit this week. You can tell Stan's in the office right now. We did reopen schools to staff this week. And those of us who are working in the buildings or engaging with the process with being masked all day, et cetera, we are grown adults. We are able to generally manage ourselves and self-regulate very well. But I have to admit, it's still a challenge. It's a challenge to navigate that environment, and it will be an even more significant challenge for our students. It's hard for adults to stay 6 feet away from each other. It's hard for adults to not pat each other on the back and want to engage in close conversations. It will be very, very difficult for our kids. So a lot of the belief that students have to be back in person for the social emotional feedback, I actually believe that the impact of that will be more detrimental to students than being away. I believe that the school environment will be a potentially traumatic environment. I believe that there are students who will struggle mightily with the expectations, and what will start out as trying to support someone in terms of keeping them healthy could potentially escalate into behavior situations that are not intentional by anyone, but are the result of the stress that we are all under in a COVID context. So looking at the safety, the instruction, social, emotional, it became very obvious to us as a team that opening the way we're opening makes the absolute most sense. Now, I want to be clear that we firmly plan, and we shared this with parents, that our intention is to be in remote learning for September and October. If something remarkable happened and everything changed and we were able to return safely and effectively to school sooner than the end of October, absolutely, we'll move on it, because there's nothing we want more than to have all of our kids and all of our staff back safely, because that's why we're in this business. We're not in this business to work remotely and have kids try to learn from home. But we're not there quite yet. But if we got there, that would be great. The firm plan right now is that I will have an October 9th decision date in terms of looking ahead to November and how we engage with November. The purpose of that is, again, to give people as much lead time as possible. I'm not a fan of last minute decisions. I want to make sure that our families are aware of what to expect and able to think ahead and plan. I want to share just a couple more things. I know I've been talking at you for a while, but this is all information that is important. First, the Vermont NEA, you may or may not be aware, today the Vermont NEA issued a very public statement that they are advocating for every student and every school employee to be able to choose whether they work in person or not work, whether they attend school in person or remotely. I'm sure that topic and that statement will get some various traction at the state level. I don't know how that will be responded to. Currently, we are not the only school district that is starting the school year in remote learning. The Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, which is the Bennington-based supervisory union, is following a plan that's pretty similar to what we are doing with a couple minor tweaks. I spoke with Lola Duffert with the Vermont Digger this afternoon, who wanted to talk about our plan, and she was doing a piece just on kind of statewide reopening and what that's looking like. And her comment to me was, hey, Dave, you folks are the first ones to kind of, her word was bite the bullet on this and just make the decision. Do you think other people are going to make the same decision? You know that I can't speak for my colleagues. And so I didn't say, yeah, I think other people will or won't, but I said, I do think other people will find themselves in circumstances where either the COVID virus or local dynamics force them to make a decision, in terms of whether they go remote or not. So we are somewhat alone in this right now, but I do not believe we will be alone in this for very long. That's only my opinion, but it's a relatively informed opinion. Last thing I'd like to share is we are committed, and I want to thank BJ Barrett. He and I had a great conversation the other day, just talking through the toughest part of all of this, which is the impact on families and on working families and on childcare, and the fact that we're frankly stuck. There's not a good answer that the school district can come up with on how to solve a crisis that was here before COVID, and it's just made more glaringly obvious by COVID, and that is the childcare crisis. We all know that we expanded pre-K a year ago and added on, childcare to that because we knew that it was a problem. We knew that it was a dilemma, but we're in a place where we don't have any real options in terms of how to fix that right now. That said, we are committed to a couple things. I've designated Sean Ruck, within our staff to be our eyes and ears on the ground, staying tuned into any community resources that we come across that might be of assistance to families. We are pumping that information out as soon as we can via social media and also through the school-based and district-based email chains. So I expect we'll continue to do that. And also there's the interesting dilemma of how some of the federal funding works with all of this. I know that Andy and Stan and Liz understand this, but just for the rest of the group, so when you think about the CARES Act, which is the first federal relief funding that came through, the feds are working on something now, but who knows when that will, manifest and what that will look like. But the CARES Act, really, the money is divided into two pots of money. Some funds are called ESSER funds and some funds are called CRF funds. To make it really simple for you, those ESSER funds are very restricted in terms of what we're able to use them for. And childcare is not one of those options within that. But we do know that in that fund stream, we've got $180,000 that we'll be able to manage to cover additional costs that we incurred as a result of COVID. So we're actually working on those funding sources right now to try to figure out what's the appropriate allocation of that. What percentage of that should go towards PD? What percentage should go towards various things? On the CRF funding, which actually has a little bit more flexibility and might allow us to engage in things like childcare, we don't yet have the allocation yet. So we aren't able to identify ways to spend money that we don't yet have, because we would be risking local taxpayer money if we tried to do something with that. But there's a slim possibility that CRF funding might open a window that we can try to figure out some way to further support our families, but we can't commit on that before we actually know what we're dealing with. I'll pause and breathe, and I see Liz's hand. Yes, Liz.
Just because you mentioned ESSER, so I had previously reported on July 15th that the Secretary of Education had opened up ESSER for application. However, the Joint Fiscal Committee met on July 29th and has postponed approval of that grant. So they're going to revisit that August 12th. So just a little update.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. That's very good information, which I'm sure Stan knows, but I'm not smart enough to know that stuff. So thank you very much for bringing that up. The nice thing about the ESSER is we have a sense on what the dollar amount's going to be. We know what we're working with. The CRF funding, which is more flexible, but also has a tighter timeline, we don't yet know the dollars. John, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. One is I haven't made a secret of the fact that my kids did not do well with remote learning in the spring, largely through their own fault, but also partly because we weren't keeping as close an eye on it as we should have, but felt like we lacked the tools until we really had to hold their feet to the fire to be able to do something with them. But having said that, I do still stand by fully supporting the decision that you made. And, just for all of the reasons that you mentioned and that we've talked about, we don't want to put anybody at risk. And there is some significant risk involved with this coronavirus. So I think it was a good decision. It may not be popular, and you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said doing what's right isn't always easy and doing what's easy isn't always right, or something along those lines. The other comment I will make is that wearing masks has been mandated where I work for months now, and we are still talking to people about pulling the mask up over their nose. You got to put your mask on. You can't take your mask off just to talk on the phone. So it's a long time before people get used to it. Some people adapt better than others, but I definitely can support the struggle that getting anybody to learn new habits like that. It's going to be a challenge, and it's not going to change at any point until they lift the mandate for masks. So
right.
That's all I have.
And interestingly, John, several of my colleagues in the region are already talking about how will they call heat days. When you think about those really warm, sticky days we get and students wearing masks, not a snow day, but it's the same type of dilemma where the weather creates a difficult situation for us. So, if there's a silver lining to our timing, we'll see. But that's being discussed out there.
Well, I've worn a mask in hot weather, doing work at my father's house and things like that, because I always mask up whenever I'm there, and doing work for my employer. And you can get used to it. It's a little tough, but it can be done.
Yeah, very true.
So anyway, there you go.
I saw BJ's hand. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tammy. I'll let you.
No, go ahead. You can. No, you can.
No. It also hasn't been a secret. I'm more of a proponent for starting school in some way in person. But I do want to at least say, I very much appreciate your informed decision over my personal opinion, though, as a parent. So, Dave, I want to leave that with that. Actually, I'm going to something about the 504 students, because I'm learning about it personally a lot more. So I have a couple questions for Coral, and David, you can kind of go in there too. Students who, while they're in school, would definitely be IEP and 504 students in that environment. I get that. I'm wondering if there's students who in this remote environment would probably qualify because it's a different environment, but because they're not in school, in school they wouldn't qualify, but in a home environment they might. Is that true? Is that something that could be?
Just because you asked specifically about 504, I'll go ahead and start there for you, BJ. The major determining factor for whether a child qualifies for a 504 is, number one, there has to be a physical or mental impairment, a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
That's not synonymous with disability, but there has to be, a doctor, a physician, a psychiatrist, someone's got to issue a diagnosis. The second gate, though, is that a team has to determine that there's something called a substantial limitation to a child's functioning. And in the home environment, it's a tough situation to determine because the factors against which you measure it are quite different. For example, a child who is oppositional defiant, well, they're more likely to be oppositional defiant with their parents forcing remote learning upon them than they are in a classroom environment where they're so trained and so used to norms and social expectations and things like that. But here's what I can say. We are open and taking calls around the clock just about at this point from parents who are wondering if there could be something going on with their kiddo, if they're wondering if their child needs accommodations to access remote learning. And we're handling those on a case-by-case basis because every kiddo has a different set of circumstances they come to the table with. But like I said, we are still making those determinations and working with teams to program for kids however that needs to look for them.
Yeah. And I think you kind of answered it, but my follow-up question would be those really early elementary students who have not been identified yet. I know because it's a process, and sometimes a multi-year process, and those youngest kids are the ones that might fall through the cracks the easiest.
Yep.
You could answer it by case basis and calling in. So
Yeah, we're doing quite a bit of outreach with parents right now via their classroom teachers, things like that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on behind the scenes as we're trying to create individualized programming for kids who just are struggling with the remote situation. So I'll just say it that if there's parents out there watching, welcome to email me directly, and I'm happy to help however I can.
okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, BJ, thanks
know
for bringing
we're
that
gonna
question up. That's a very, very good, it's a very good topic to get into. Thank you. Anything else I could answer just on my report?
Anything else? Anyone else? Len.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just a couple of statements more than questions, David. I really think we as a district need to consider, and I know we've kind of put a hiring freeze on, but we need to expand. I think we need to expand our counseling parameters, because I think there's parents and students, but especially parents, who need some counseling, who need somewhere to touch base. And I would hope that we, and I mentioned this to you the other day, I really think it's important for us as a district to put out contacts, so that parents, students, and I know there's a whole lot of confidentiality issues there, but put some contact places out there, whether the counselors do a once a week, how's your kids doing kind of thing, and here are some tools that you can use that might help them do better. And the other thing is, so that's the counseling piece. The other thing I think is important that we share with the community is, even if we came back to school under normal, it ain't normal, and so you're going to be dealing with kids that are staying 6 feet apart and wearing masks, and it's not normal. It's just not normal. So I think it's important that, and I think you've made the right decision, David. I'm not questioning your decision at all. It's just, we need to inform people that what schools look like ain't going to happen. It just is not going to happen. So
yeah, Len, I agree with you. And for the board, Len and I had a conversation kind of on the counseling concept yesterday, and I agree that's a fantastic, much like the child care piece, and how can we support people with that? How can we support people even with our internal staff on counseling? Len, you'll be happy to know when I mentioned those funding sources, right? The ESSER and the CRF funds. So under those ESSER funds, which we do know our dollar amounts, Brian and I were looking today at, we do have the ability to use some of those funds for mental health supports and services. So even the concept of if counselors were working extra time outside the school day to connect with a family on a regular basis, or office hours, if you will, whatever that might look like, I think we've got some options to be able to create that lens. And once we figure it out, we'll just need to communicate it. And as you know, in the school environment, again and again and again, we just want to keep communicating. But your point is also well taken that, we keep saying normal, but that normal may not return for a long, long time. There's going to be an adjusted version of what this looks like. Thanks for that feedback, though. BJ.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know we had those 3 positions in the budget and we decided to freeze them. I'm wondering if we, especially in lieu of the longevity of this COVID thing, if we should reconsider that a little bit as a board, and maybe not open up to a permanent position, but maybe open it up to like a just emergency 1 year position, you know, with hopes of it continuing, at least one more, because I know that was something that helped my daughter, was being able to talk with a counselor once a week. And I can imagine that same service would help, but I also worry that we are very understaffed to be able to provide that. So I'm just wondering if that might be something we want to talk about again.
Got my vote.
Andy.
Yeah.
There we go. As the former chair of the Finance Committee, my concern is that, or not my concern, I was going to wait until the legislature met again in August and see what they did about the funding. Then we'd have a much better sense of what to expect. And I do agree that we need to look at those staff, particularly the counselors, and it would be great to hire some or all three of them. But first, I wanted to wait.
Yeah, my opinion on that is I think Andy's perspective is very valid and very wise. Administratively, if you asked us, we'd say absolutely, we'd love to get those positions, and that's why we proposed them in the first place. But we also have to respect our taxpayer dollars, and we all know that we're in for a really challenging budget year coming up, and every dollar we save is going to help down the road. So it's a tough place. Knowing where the legislature is going with how to address FY22 will be good information that can help the board to make a good decision. But if you ask administrators, we'll say thumbs up, tell us how many we can get, and we'll be ready to move, you know, if and when that time were to come.
I'd like to just pop in and say something quickly, is that I just want to let the community know that you know, we've all had as board members, various conversations with parents expressing concerns over, you know, remote versus in-person, depending upon what side of the picture you land on. And I think that it's a really important time for us to pull together as a community and to support each other, and to also, if someone, you know, and I offered this to the parent that I spoke to earlier, like the board, the administration is certainly open to suggestions. We don't have all the answers because we've never been in this situation before. So if anyone has suggestions, please forward them along. We're happy to consider them. And likewise, I would encourage everybody to reach out to one another in the community. And if you know of something and you can share it with somebody else, you don't need to go through us. Please do it, because I'm sure it would be appreciated. And likewise, if you can help in some aspect, offer that help. I mean, we are a community and we are trying to do the best we can. And I think that that requires all of us to pitch in for one another. And if there's ever a time to do it, this pandemic has made it much more apparent that now is the time to do it. So in the best interest of all of our kids and one another, this is the time to really just speak up, offer options. I mean, it's really easy to criticize, but, and I understand the frustration. As I explained to the person that I was just talking to before our meeting, my own family, I have relatives who have school-age children in another state who are in this exact same situation. And I know the frustration. I hear it when I talk to my brother, you know, every single time I talk to him. And the only way we can get through it, and we will get through it, is together, because all of our kids matter to us. And the decision that our administration made with our support was truly with the eyes towards the best interest for the health of our kids and our community. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, anybody else have anything to add on the reopening? Any questions, comments?
I guess, Tammy, I just would want to add, I plan to follow the regular pattern of district communication to staff, board, and parents on Fridays, generally. Parents will begin to hear more and more from their local principals, and they already are hearing more and more from local principals. But folks in the community that are interested, each email that I put out to our parents actually ends up being posted on our webpage, and there's a link right on the front page. So if anybody's interested in what we're putting out, it's readily available. That's at millriverschools.org.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. So we'll go on to, speaking of web page, the next item is board member web page contents. So there we go. I know that there was a question, Liz, you had was it Liz that you had the discussion? No. Who had the discussion? Someone had a discussion about getting web
Oh, no, it
email
was me.
addresses. Yes,
I'm so
okay.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay, it's a long day.
Sorry. Yeah, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I do know what you're talking about. Right. So I had asked, I noticed, I went to our website to see when people's terms were up. And I noticed that on the board member page, it just has their names. It doesn't give her terms. And so I asked Sean if he would add terms, and he wanted that to come from the full board and not just me as an individual board member, which I thought was reasonable. So I wanted to ask if, I don't know, I feel like it's easier to go to the district webpage as like a catch-all for all the information as opposed to going to each town. I know I can go to each town. I just thought it would be helpful to have it all in one place.
And didn't you also want, wasn't the suggestion to also have our email addresses right next to our names?
Oh, yeah. And then I thought, yes, that our email address, thank you, Tammy. You're so on the ball. That's why you're chair. I thought our names, yeah, could be like our email addresses could be hyperlinked to our names so that people could really easily contact us.
And I just wanted, when Liz emailed that to me, and I felt that it was a discussion that we should all have, because I know that we each have different schedules in our lives, and I don't know how frequently. I would hate for someone to click on an email address and think they're emailing me, for instance, and expect, you know, in the world of email, a rather fast response, and then have it sit for a few days or maybe a week or something and not get a response and get frustrated with us. So I wanted us to have a discussion about it before we did anything, or as a board had a consensus how we would like that to be, because I would just like people to know that if they email us, unless there's a message, because for instance, right now on my email for this week, I am like swamped with work. So I wanted anyone who emailed me to know, hey, I will get back to you eventually, but I can't promise it's going to be as quickly as it might normally be. So if this is urgent, please reach out to a fellow board member in your town if you have a real urgent concern. So like, I just wanted to run that by everybody and get input before we give Sean some direction. Len.
Hi. I guess my question is, do we need to set up some sort of procedure in terms of, like I've received emails, as we all have, over the past few weeks, and the ones that are directed to me, I've responded to, because I felt that was okay. They weren't directed to the board. But do we need to come up with a policy procedure? I hate to say this. Gosh, I hate to say this. That if someone sends an email to the board in general, my expectation would be that, Tammy, you would respond to that. And I'm not going to, because it's you know, and I know you're liking that, right?
Not liking that.
No, I'm sorry. But I'm not going to respond to it because it's sent to the board as a whole. And I really think the response should come from the board chair. And so I just don't know if we need to make sure we're all on the same page or whatever. And I don't know.
Nope. Liz, go ahead.
So having just run into this, wherein the board was contacted and Tammy had an automatic response that she could not respond in a timely fashion, you know, another board member responded, and I thought, so that was well done. And I think perhaps we should be in the practice of doing that. So right, the person's question was responded to in a timely fashion, and someone else responded to it. And now Dave has a question.
Yes, Dave, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, to Liz's point on Len's question. I think it's very topical as well. You know, so Len, if let's say a question came in to me that was for the board, because sometimes that happens, but it was a personnel related thing, you know, I'm going to redirect that to you. Or if it were a finance related thing, I'm going to redirect that to Liz. So there's a topic piece to it. I think your comment about Tammy makes sense. If it's a collective, hey, board, you know, here's how I feel about this. I'd like to hear back from you. I think that makes perfect sense as a Tammy response. The flag issues, you know, the way we've been approaching that, when I've received emails that were intended for the board, I've passed those on to the Community Engagement Committee and to Maria to kind of process and curate those. So I think as long as we just approach it with that mindset of let's make sure the right person gets this so that they can respond, that probably works. And then we can avoid creating, you know, extra policy and procedure as well, which, you know, we always love to not do if we don't need to, right?
I don't want extra policies and procedures by any stretch of the imagination. That's the last thing I want. But I just want to make sure that we have a place that we can say, okay, have you spoken with the board chair? That kind of thing. Or have you spoken with the finance chair? Have you spoken with the personnel chair? Have you spoken with the policy chair? You know, to keep those things differentiated. That's just what I'm looking for.
Well, didn't we talk at one point about having an email for each committee with, I mean, I've talked to Sean about this. I know it's in the works, is a page for committees saying this is what the committee does and is responsible for. This is an email for that committee, and that committee would automatically go to the chair, and then the chair could send it in whichever direction, which doesn't require policy. It just requires a system and a structure.
And I think that that's a good idea, that we should maybe follow through with that and ask, you know, and ask Brian to set those up for each committee, because we had discussed that, like, you know, when committee chair changes, then the old person that was leaving may still be getting emails that might not, you know, they might not be able to get to. And I have no problem doing that. BJ, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go technical recommendations. I think the community engagement at Mill River Schools worked well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the webpage right now. I would suggest putting that up as the primary linked email and keeping the little blurbs on how to set up the first initial last on the board members' email. I know it's a little bit extra step, so that way they'll be encouraged to email that community engagement. I do think it would be good to add on a little bit of definitely the chair information on the board homepage. I think that would be very important. Who's chair and who's on what committee. I think would be very good to put on there. And I know Brian can set up aliases. So like I'm the policy chair and I don't see any problem.
As the person who receives all the emails to the community engagement email address, I see the logic in that, but I also, in the interest of transparency and information about the board, I think it is important for us to share what the committees are and what they're responsible for. And I don't think it would hurt to let people email a committee if they have a question about something specific. No, then I don't have to house. And then also, there's going to be for sure there's going to be emails that are missent, but then we can read them.
So look at it this way then. We'll treat the committee, your community engagement, as one of the committee ones. So I would have a policy one, you have a community engagement one, and then we probably should have a board members that will go to probably Tammy as the board chair, and that's the one we link. So they would, on the homepage, it would be linked to the board members email that the public emails goes to Tammy, and then on the subcommittee pages is where you can get the email to each committee. And I guess community engagement might be one of those, as would policy.
Liz, you had something to say?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, you know, the role of community engagement is not to field public stuff. And it's not a board committee. So I'm just concerned about that. And, you know, there is a board email to contact the whole board, and each one of us represents our respective communities. And as elected officials, you know, our constituents know, you know, who their neighbors are, who we are, and I think they should have the option, again, to contact the whole board. And then and I think, in terms of protocols, so Len doesn't want to say procedure or policy. So the protocol, Len, protocol, could be, if Tammy can respond, great. And if Tammy can't, again, the fact that you said, please contact a representative of your community, that worked out well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't mind if as a general, we have a general email that's either public comment at millriverschools.org or the board at millriverschools.org, and that could be the general one. But I think that if we're going to have separate committee emails for like policy and community engagement and finance and whatever else, buildings and grounds, that it should be listed on the same page, so that if someone wants to eliminate, and not just because I'm trying to not have to answer every single email and forward it on, but just so that if someone I have a buildings issue, then I can email buildings and grounds. It makes perfect sense to me. I have a finance issue. Let me just email finance rather than email the whole board. And I would certainly want or expect that the board would share, like we have been doing very well. I think the system of sharing responses to emails and the emails themselves that we've been getting with everyone keeps everybody informed, but then at least they're targeted when they go, because I think that while there could be a general board email address, it's just and if that's the only address that's on a page, my fear is that every email is going to come there. And quite frankly, I don't have the time to say with every single email, oh, this is for Maria, oh, this is for Liz, this is for John, this is for BJ. Like, it's not going to happen. And then we fall back into the slump where people are not getting the answers in a timely manner. And I don't want to see that happen. Dave.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So listen, I'm hearing the message loud and clear. I'd like to ask you, let me connect with Brian and Sean, and we'll work on building out what you're talking about. I am thinking that we need to have a separate standalone page for board committees, maybe even a unique page for each committee. I'd love if any of our committee chairs have a current committee charge. I know that each of our committees has been in various places, and if you could send that my way, that would be awesome, because we could add that to a page that talks about that committee. If you don't have that, that's fine. Once it's ready, we can throw it on. But let us build something out. Give me about 48 hours or so, and we'll probably have something turned around to at least say, hey, everybody, take a look at this and offer us some feedback, and we can go through a little bit of revision period, and we'll get it nailed down for sure within a week or so, if that works okay for everyone.
Yeah, Maria?
That works. And I know that, I hope that my understanding was that Sean was working on that, but it's been in process for quite a while. And so I would check with him and see if he's collected any of those already from committee. And I also want to clarify that the Community Engagement Committee is a board committee.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for taking care of that. And thanks, Liz, for bringing in the conversation so that we could share it, because I think that's important. So I think this is a Stan thing, technology purchase approval. Would it be?
It's a Brian thing.
Tammy, we've also got a board professional development update. If you want to do technology, that's A-okay.
Oh, good. I skipped right over one thing. Let's go to professional development. Let's follow in order.
Jody, you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah. So, Dave, can I just ask clarifyingly, has the board had a chance to look over any of the information yet? Okay. No. I'll give you the quick and dirty rundown. So part of the relevant goals to the board in our district 3-year equity plan is to designate 5 early release days for district staff to receive equity focused training, that the board will conduct some equity focused training, and that the leadership team will review the basic principles of restorative justice, begin engaging in work to increase restorative justice in our schools, and that the LT will complete anti-racism training in the fall of 2020. So when we began to look for that, we were looking at a couple different considerations. We wanted to make sure that we were appropriately sourcing funding for professional development, because we do understand it's important to pay people from historically marginalized populations who are doing equity work, the value of of their work in helping us along in that. And so we were able to find some sourcing from Title IX grant funding, which is federal grant funding, so it's not local budget. We wanted to make sure we found equity trainers that had knowledge of Vermont and rural cultures and school systems to make sure that we were really focused on our needs as a district. We wanted to make sure that the equity trainer was a recognized leader in equity-focused professional development, and that we wanted the district equity PD to be scaffolded and consistent across all of our stakeholder groups when we were looking at how to line up different professional development for different stakeholder groups. So I'm really pleased to say that I have had a couple conversations with Rebecca Haslam of Seed the Way. Rebecca is a former Vermont Teacher of the Year. She's a Doctor of Philosophy. She is a professor at St. Mike's, has worked in Vermont systems for many, many years. And as you can imagine, in this season of equity work, she is a very busy person and is not able to work with all of the districts that have contacted her for support, but said because Mill River has shown longstanding previous commitment to moving forward in equity work and has been able to show a multi-year equity plan, that she feels comfortable engaging with us to try to work together. And so the primary intent of this conversation is I wanted to put forth the idea of engaging Rebecca not only to do our all district staff professional development and our leadership team professional development, but also engage her to work with the board. We were able to identify 3 common evening times that Rebecca would be available to work with the board, from 5 to 7 p.m. on January 20th, April 21st, and May 19th. Those are all Wednesdays, following kind of the ideas behind in last school year when the board conducted group learning together on every other board meeting. The recommended scope and sequence that we thought might be useful to the board would be the first session on a foundational workshop on identity, bias, and student success. The second workshop being racism, Black Lives Matter, and implications for school systems. And the third session being on identifying inequities within our own district in MRUUSD and visioning forward. And so I just came to look for board feedback on that potential plan.
And Tammy disappeared, and I think Adrian is in a select board meeting. So if it pleases the board, I'll just try to facilitate this conversation. I do want to add. Yeah, Tammy said she's trying to get back with us. There she is. I want to add that I support the approach that I think we should all be speaking the same language. Rebecca is going to be delivering training with our leadership team and with our full staff. So I think it makes total sense to align our board work with that. And as Jody said, she is a difficult person to line up for these things. So the fact that she's expressed willingness based on the commitment that the board has shown and our district has shown to equity work, that speaks well of the work you've been doing as a board. So would certainly invite any feedback. And Tammy, I'll give it back to you to facilitate. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. You all just froze, and then I thought it was not me. So Len, go ahead.
Just a question, and I'm concerned about the restorative justice only in that we're not giving it due diligence because it's not an easy thing to implement. And you really need, and I'm sorry, I'm going to harp on this. You really need to get the whole staff, faculty, administration on board. And Jody, you know that before you can implement it. And so, when I look at our plan and we have one in-service day for restorative justice, I think we need more than that. And that's just my opinion.
So, Len, when you speak about long-term scaffolding planning around restorative practice, you speak to my belief system and my heart, absolutely. So we've already started talking as a leadership team about restorative practices. At our July leadership team retreat, we spent some time beginning as a leadership team to start to engage in the deep foundational beliefs of restorative practice. And we are committed to continuing that work at the leadership team level throughout the year, as you know, because it is the leadership team that makes a lot of decisions around student behavior management. And so that's really a place that I think this year we really need to focus that work on, because we need to build capacity as a leadership team in order to appropriately continue to scale that out at the classroom and at the school level. We did put in a date for Rebecca Haslam to work with the entire district staff around the basic principles of our startup practice. That doesn't mean necessarily implementing it fully at the school level. It doesn't mean implementing it fully at the school level, but just to start to engage with that work, because you know that I have significant training in that realm, but Rebecca has much more training in that realm. And so given the amount of funding that we have and the amount of professional development time we have, we thought that this was a careful plan to build capacity in a long-term way that is really just, this year is about focusing on introducing the foundational beliefs to our entire staff and engaging really deeply as a leadership team.
And I'm fine with that. And I just hope, I think it's important that we let people know that this isn't going to happen tomorrow. That's all. And just say, okay, people, to the teachers, to the staff, and say, this is a process that's going to take time, and we understand that. So if you're thinking you're going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be all better, it ain't going to happen. And that's, I think that's important that we let people know that. That's all. And I know you're doing it the right way, Jody, because I know your experience with it. But people out there are like, well, why can't we just do it? You flip a switch and we've got it all figured. It doesn't work. It's you have to build a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Len, I think you just titled your next book on change management in schools. It's, if you think you're going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be better, it ain't going to happen. So that's the dynamic of what we have to manage. In schools and in our schools, we've got good people with good hearts who want to do good things for kids. But Len, we've got to build the systems and build the culture to make it stick. And I will say that's something I'm proud of with our equity work. We've spent several years administratively laying the foundation. The board has done the same thing. I had a colleague ask me the other day, hey, can you recommend a good training to participate in to get people in my district started on equity work? And I said, I can, but I'd rather have the conversation with you about how to build a culture for it and how to put the policy in place and the expectations in place and how to hire properly. Like all the things that will actually allow good work to be sustained. So your points are very well taken.
Liz, did you have something to add?
I don't. Sorry. None of what I said was meant as a criticism. I hope nobody took it that way. It's just, man, it's big, and until you can get people to muckle onto it, it's going to be tough.
And Len, I would say that about all of our equity work, right? So all of this stuff is integral to treating all of our students with the dignity and honor that they deserve. All of it, I wish, could be done tomorrow, and all of it is going to take deep, sustained, long-term learning to really change all of the systems and structures.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Liz.
Jody, I was just wondering if you could please repeat those dates, because colleagues of mine who have done this training with Rebecca Haslam have just raved about how incredible and transformative it is and it was. And so I want to be sure that may I attend these trainings? I'm inviting myself.
Oh, so 100%. So what I'm proposing is 3 sessions just for the board, and at which point I would say, may I attend these sessions, as well as we are setting up trainings for the leadership team, and then 3 district-wide sessions with her where absolutely the entire board would be invited with enthusiasm to attend those as well.
Okay, and did you? I know you threw out some dates. Are those board dates or
those were the board
dates?
dates? Would you like me to
read
those?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it would be 5 to 7 p.m. on January 20th, April 21st, and May 19th. Would you like the all district days as well? Yes?
Sure. And I'll put this all in the chat if anybody needs it.
So for district work, these will all be virtual this year because we wanted to make sure this happens no matter what our situation is. From 1 to 3 p.m., these will be on January 25th, March 31st, and April 26th. And if it pleases the board, I can share with you just a document that outlines all of this.
That would be great. Thank you, Jody.
Okay.
And by the way, those board dates are second Wednesday of the month, normal board professional development session dates. So we tried to line those up with kind of pre-existing model that you had in place.
Great. Andy.
I'm very excited about this. It sounds terrific. And Jody, I want to thank you for all the hard work you have done. I'm sure it took a great deal of time and effort, and it just looks terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments, questions? Hearing none. We will move on. And now we will go to Brian and the technology purchase approval. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Tammy. Hello, board. Hello, administrators at the table. I had a document that was attached with materials tonight outlining the bid and my request. Tell you really briefly, this is a normal type of purchase. It's just a little bit later in the year, given some of the budget dynamics of ending last year and rolling into this new fiscal year. If you have any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer those, but I'd be looking for a motion to either approve or not approve.
Okay. Liz.
So my question is for Stan or Andy. Is this money budgeted? Stan, did you just do a thumbs up?
Yes, it's budgeted.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to accept this bid for $15,477.70 for 70 laptops with licensing.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
I'll
please.
second it.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Brian, only because I'm a techie guy. Can you tell me, are these like touchscreen Chromebooks or what are you buying?
No, these are replacements for what we've been using 7, 12, 11-inch HP Chromebooks. We have some iPads that we've been using, mixing in when folks need something a little different, but the repairability and the cost and the durability, we love them and we want to keep rocking with these ones actually.
Okay.
So no touchscreen.
Are you getting new bags or anything? Not that this
great
weird
question.
environment warrants it.
Yeah. No, we have a little bit of a stockpile of bags we haven't really used much, and we haven't had a huge need to order any new ones. So no, not planning on that at this point right now. The ones that we have at school tend to live in carts when they're not really being used.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Discussion?
Yeah, not about this. Finish the vote.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then I will call the question. All those in favor of approving the motion to purchase the Chromebooks as Brian outlined, please say aye. Give me a thumbs up. And anyone opposed, please say no. Okay. Hearing nothing. They're approved. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Yep,
Do you need anything else from us?
Nope. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to committee reports. So, Len, you're first up with personnel.
I love it when I get to go first. Okay. The personnel committee met this evening, and we have a couple of things. Some board action is requested, and I would like to make a motion to approve a letter of employment for Tasha Turin as a long-term sub in art at the elementary level, a 1.0 full-time equivalency.
Is there a second? Thanks, Liz. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the letter of employment for Tasha, please say aye. or thumbs up? Excellent. And anyone opposed? Seeing no thumbs down and hearing nothing, we will welcome Tasha to our Mill River community. Yes, it's a little different virtually.
Second is to approve a contract for Samuel Rogers as a music teacher, a .2 full-time equivalency at Shrewsbury Mountain School, and I will make that a motion.
Excellent. Is there a second? Thank you, Liz. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving Samuel Rogers as a music teacher at Shrewsbury Mountain School, please give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed, please say no. Hearing nothing. Congratulations and welcome to Samuel. We welcome him to our community.
And lastly, just to update folks, we met and discussed the superintendent evaluation tonight. And again, I need to thank Maria and the board because they've all been very helpful in terms of providing information. We interviewed the entire district staff and several principals within the district, and Maria and I did all that virtually, and it was great. It really was. It was enlightening. I think we learned a lot, and it gave us a good picture of what David does. I mean, we see David here, but we don't see him on a day-to-day basis working in the buildings. And so I think it helped us a lot. What we would like to do, and again, I think, Maria, we've met several times and kind of tried to pull this together. We would like a little more time to come up with a narrative that we can share with the committee and with the board and with David. And but that's going to take a while. Not a long time, but we're pretty well there. So our intent is in September at the September board meeting, and we'll have a personnel committee meeting on September 2nd. And at that point, we should be able to provide the personnel committee and then the board and also David with where we are. And just in general, I think it's important to understand that things are good. You know, Maria, do you want to say something?
I would like to say something coherent and complete once we come back to you all in a month, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. And so we have all the information now. It's just our effort to try to put it all together in a way that makes sense. And David, what I don't know if you still have a copy of that evaluation tool.
The one we were looking at, like March, February. Yeah, I've got that on my computer somewhere. Yes.
Okay. And if you could go through that and send it to either Maria or I, and then we can incorporate that into the information that we have. And then, right, Maria, isn't that what we had? And then we'll go from there.
Yep, can do. No problem at all.
And I really want to thank all the board members and everybody in the central office and the administrators that we talked to. The folks were great. And given the situation that we had where, you know, this was all supposed to happen in February or March, it's been good. And we're getting there. And actually, Maria and I have some things that we'd like to change in the evaluation tool, which I also think is good. You know, as we're looking at it, it's like, do we really need this? Do we really need that? So it's been a good experience for us, and I think a good experience for the whole evaluation deal. So, and our next meeting is September 2nd, and I'm done.
Excellent. Thank you, Len. Policy, BJ.
Yeah. So. Unexpectedly, we did need to cancel our last meeting, topics of which we will bring up later on. because I know Jody did a lot of work with it. What I actually want to do is we got an email today from the Vermont School Boards Association talking about 2 model policies for decision making in COVID. So I'm wondering if, from the policy committee people here, if we would be willing to have another meeting either next Tuesday or the following Tuesday to possibly cover this. I'm just kind of want to ask that since I got the board right here.
What time would that be at?
That would be probably on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
I'm going to say not on the 11th because it's voting day.
Probably a good idea. David?
Good point.
Yeah, BJ, can I just throw out to you, because I'm familiar with where those model policies came from. So really what those are rooted in guidance that came from the AOE a couple weeks ago about boards either making the determination about instructional dispositions or delegating. So I'd actually suggest to our board, since you already had delegated the responsibility, you actually don't need to pursue either of those. If you wanted to, you could, and it would be to pursue the delegation one just to get it on the books, but you still have
That's
the right.
why I wanted to have the discussion. I mean, we got it today, so I didn't know when else to have the discussion except now.
Just wanted to save you a meeting, that's all.
Okay, Len?
Yeah, well, and I just think looking at those policies, we've sort of given David the responsibility of dealing with that, dealing with closings and things like that, as long as he's fed it past the board. So I think for us to develop a policy is not necessary. That's my opinion.
I didn't even look at it. I mean, I had barely 5 minutes in the last meeting I was in. I was driving. So that's why I wanted to bring it up to see if it was something we should be talking about or not. So, okay. So the answer is, I guess our next meeting will be the first Tuesday of next month, and I will generate a agenda therein. I'm wondering if David might have some more to put in there since it's very different time. So he might be able to add to it. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, BJ. Negotiations. Adrian is not with us. Is she? No, she's not. She had her select board meeting she had to be at. So we are having some negotiation talks with the union. I guess I could report in her place, and nothing really to report yet, but we're talking, which is good. So that's nice to be back in engaging in those conversations. So.
And that group meets again on August 17th is the next meeting.
Thank you. I did not have that date handy. Thanks, Dave. So then we'll move on to buildings and grounds. John.
We did not meet in August. Our next meeting theoretically would have been September 1st. We would have started school at that point. We thought we would have some stuff to talk about, possibly, but given that the date has been pushed back to the 8th, I'm not sure that we will have that meeting. I'll talk to Gary and update folks as we get closer, but there's nothing really much to report on right now, and our next meeting is a little up in the air. So that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Maria, community engagement.
We have not had a meeting since our last full board meeting, but we do have an upcoming meeting on the 17th at 7 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you. And then finance, Liz.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, so I have a financial update, an education fund update. This is from the August 2020 fiscal focus. Education property tax rates are normally set high enough to fund voter-approved education spending and to maintain a 5% stabilization reserve in the education fund. Because of revenue shortfalls due to the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically non-property tax revenues were down $21.3 million. Doing so this year would have resulted in an increase in FY21 education property taxes that the legislature deemed unacceptable. current estimates of the education fund based on a preliminary FY20 closeout and the latest revenue projections for FY21 indicate a deficit of about $92 million in FY21. I had lastly reported a shortfall of $105.4 million. And this scenario will be addressed in the upcoming session when the legislature reconvenes to plan the remaining FY21 budget beyond September. And tonight we have payroll warrants and pay orders to review as follows. I have a payroll warrant dated July 31st, 2020 in the amount of $86,222.06. I have a payroll order dated July 31st, 2020 in the amount of $1,020.93. We have a payroll order dated July 31st, 2020 of $27,192.89 and a payroll order dated August 1st, 2020 in the amount of $4,382.67 for a total of $118,818.55. I have the following pay orders dated, let's see, August 5th. I have one in the amount of $802.56. I have one in the amount of $256,157.03. Those are from the general fund. I have a third pay order from the lunch fund in the amount of $22,283.04. And lastly, from the general fund, a pay order in the amount of $39,076.29 for a total of $318,318.92. And I move we approve the payroll and pay orders as presented. This is the tongue twister.
Thank you, Liz. Is there a second? Thank you, Len. Okay. Any discussion? Doug.
I'm glad Stan is here. One of the pay orders is kind of long. It's about 4 pages. I think on page 3, I noticed a number on the right side of 25,000 and a few pennies here and there. Directly to the left is where the definition of, and I noticed the word Mercedes-Benz. Stan, did like the driver's training guy get a new vehicle or something?
Yeah, those we're now getting Mercedes-Benz buses. No, that's it's for a bus lease, but it's just their financing company, Mercedes-Benz.
I figured it was. Yeah.
So,
all right.
Stan, are you driving a Mercedes?
I wish.
Doug, I have the same question.
Other than that, everything was fine as far as I could tell.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doug. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the pay orders and payroll as read, please give me the thumbs up. And I see it from everybody. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the pay orders and payroll as read are approved unanimously. Thank you, Liz. Do you have anything else for us?
Just that our next committee meeting will be Monday, August 24th at 4:30 p.m. via Zoom.
Excellent. Thank you.
Or Google Meet, whatever this is.
Okay. And are you also giving us a financial status update, or was that part of what you've already done? Because it's number 11 on the agenda.
That's part of what I already did.
Okay.
Unless Dan wanted to add anything.
No. Okay. All right. Just making sure. And George is not with us this evening, so as we move to his favorite part of the movie, the evening, he's not here. Does anyone else have any other legal business? Hearing none. Agenda building. So on our next meeting, we would be meeting early for our PD, and that would be at 6 o'clock, correct, Amy? Okay. And then for the board meeting, what do we have, Dave?
Tammy, I'd recommend, we've got a couple standbys, right? Equity work updates and reopening updates. And then I'd recommend central office and principal reports, because we'll be, approaching the end of August at that point. So everyone will have updates to share about summertime work.
Excellent. And I'm sure that there will be other things that will pop up in the meantime without any doubt. So does that work for anybody? Everybody else? BJ, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to add, as part of the opening update, I'd really love to hear a little bit more in depth from Andrew about especially the difference between the emergency learning and how it's really going to be different this year and really going to support the students moving forward, as opposed to their, I think that would be appropriate timing.
And you know what?
Thanks, BJ.
And you know what else along those same lines, Dave, maybe just if Andrew's going to speak, or if you can speak to, for any members of the public or parents who are hearing the words, I think our parent earlier had mentioned it, synchronous and asynchronous learning, maybe just an explanation of what that means and how that looks, so that people who might not understand those terms, we can keep everybody on the same page and they know what we're talking about.
Yeah, those are Andrew terms. We'll make sure it gets put into Dave terms so that somebody like me can understand. So no problem at all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? I don't hear anything. We have no need for an executive session, is my understanding, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we can adjourn by consensus if everybody is ready to leave at 8:38. Okay, see lots of thumbs up really quick on that one. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.